Good morning and welcome back to Empty Cloud Monastery. My name is Bhante Suddhāso, and now we'll be looking at another discourse from the Buddha. So I'll start with paying homage to the Buddha, and then I'll read through the sutta and give some explanations, and then I'll take any questions at the end. So we'll start with homage to the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. So the sutta for this morning is from the Samyutta Nikaya, chapter 35, sutta number 101, which is titled here Patama Natumhāka Sutta. So the first Natumhāka Sutta. So Natumhāka literally means not yours. So the discourse on what is not yours. And the sutta begins, the Buddha says, monks, give up what is not yours. And he says, giving it up will be for your welfare and happiness. And what is not yours? And then the Buddha answers his own question. I love it when the Buddha does this. When he asks a question, then it immediately answers it himself. So he says, what is not yours? The eye is not yours. Give it up. Giving it up will be for your welfare and happiness. Sights are not yours. Give them up. Giving them up will be for your welfare and happiness. Eye consciousness is not yours. Give it up, etc. Eye contact is not yours. The pleasant, painful, or neutral feeling that arises dependent upon eye contact is not yours. And he applies the same sequence. So the ear is not yours, sounds are not yours, ear consciousness, eye contact, the pleasant, painful, and neutral feelings that arise based upon ear contact. And then the same for nose, tongue, and body. So again, the nose is not yours, smells are not yours, and so on. Tongue is not yours, flavors are not yours, the body is not yours, tangible sensations are not yours. And then finally, he comes to the mind and applies the same statement. So the mind is not yours. Give it up. Giving it up will be for your welfare and happiness. Mental objects are not yours. Give them up. Mind consciousness is not yours. Mind contact is not yours. And the pleasant, painful, or neutral feeling that arises based upon mind contact is not yours. So give it up. Giving it up will be for your welfare and happiness. And then the Buddha gives a simile. So he says, suppose a person was to carry off the grass, sticks, branches, and leaves in this Jeta's grove. That's the forest they were in at the time. So suppose a person were to carry off the grass, sticks, branches, and leaves in this Jeta's grove, or burn them, or do what they want with them. Would you think this person is carrying us off, burning us, or doing what they want with us? And the monks reply, no, Bhante. Why is that? Because to us, that's neither ourself, it's not us, and it doesn't belong to us. And the Buddha says, in the same way, the eye is not yours. Give it up. Giving it up will be for your welfare and happiness. And he goes through the whole list again. So the ear is not yours, nose is not yours, tongue is not yours, body is not yours, mind is not yours. Give it up. Sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, and thought are not yours. Give them up. And he concludes with, again, the statement, giving it up will be for your welfare and happiness. So that's this discourse. So it's not a particularly long discourse, but it's touching on a very deep and important concept, which is it's directly targeting the sense of personal ownership that we have over our six senses. So we usually relate to eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind as being me, as being mine. as being a critical aspect of who we are. And therefore, we also relate to our sensory experiences as being mine, as being me, as being an expression of who we are. So we think, this is me, this body is me, these eyes are me. Therefore, I am seeing something using my eyes. So it is my visual experience. And the way that I react and respond to that, that's my experience. That's my reality. That's my truth. That's my perspective. And then we personalize it. It's like, well, and this is what makes me a unique individual. This is what makes me who I am, is the particular kinds of sensory experiences that I have and the way that I relate to it, the way that I react to it, the way that I interpret it. We take all of this as a way of identifying ourselves, of distinguishing what makes us who we are. And the Buddha is saying, actually, none of this is us. And he gives the simile of the grass, sticks, branches, and leaves in the forest. So what are all the grass, sticks, branches, and leaves in the forest? Well, it's just part of nature. So we can clearly see that, all of these bits of plants and trees and such, we can see these are all natural phenomena which have arisen in nature due to natural causes and conditions. We can see that they shift and change according to natural causes and conditions. But most importantly, we clearly see that this is not who we are. We can relate to it. We can have an experience of it. But we recognize that it doesn't ultimately define us. But rather, it's just a temporary experience. So what the Buddha is encouraging us to do is to cultivate the same attitude towards our own senses. So when he says the eye is not yours, give it up, he doesn't mean that in the sense of like go and get a spoon and gouge out your eyes or something. Like he doesn't mean give it up in the sense of remove it and throw it away. When he says give up the body, he's not talking about killing your body or something like that. But rather when he's saying to give up eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind, he's talking about relinquishing self-identity. Relinquishing our sense of personal ownership over these experiences, and instead to relate to them as being natural processes, as being manifestations of nature, manifestations of natural causes and conditions, and recognizing that ultimately it's not something which defines who we are. It's not something which we need to try to hold on to. So when visual experience is changing, well, okay, no problem, because that's not who we are. When sensations are arising, whether pleasant, painful, or neutral, well, that's okay, because that's not who we are either. So we're not bothered by the painful experiences, the painful sensations. We're not obsessed with the pleasant sensations. We're not confused by the neutral sensations, because again, we're not relating to it as me or mine. We're just relating to it as a impersonal, natural phenomenon. So this also means the willingness to allow every aspect of body and mind to come to an end. So one of the major problems that we encounter as unawakened beings is that because we identify as this body and mind, we think this body and mind are me. This ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind is me. This experience of sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, and thought, this is me. Because we have this misperception, then we don't want this experience to end. We don't want it to change too dramatically. We become attached to it, fixated on it. Again, because we think this is me. I can't possibly let go of me. I can't possibly lose me. This mental experience is me. These thoughts and opinions are me. This way of looking at the world is me. Therefore, I can't possibly let it go. I can't possibly part with it. This is how we normally relate to experience. And of course, that causes a tremendous amount of agony for us. It causes a lot of suffering, because the reality is that everything is constantly changing. The person who we used to think we were doesn't exist anymore. That person has already disappeared and changed. There's something else here, which we also misidentify as me. And this also is in a process of changing, of disappearing and being replaced by something else. And then that also we misidentify as me. So we're constantly trying to attach a personal identity to things which are ultimately impersonal, ultimately not ours, ultimately not reliable, in the sense that we cannot hold on to or maintain any particular aspect of our experience, because every aspect of our experience is in a constant state of change, a constant state of disappearance. So if we're willing to allow every single aspect of our body and mind to cease, to disappear, without the slightest bit of sense of loss, without the slightest sense of grief or disappointment, then the result is that then the mind becomes infinitely happy. So if you're dependent upon anything to do with your current sensory experience, well, it can change. So if your particular way of seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, or thinking, if that's something which you depend upon for your self-identity or for your sense of happiness or your sense of personal being, well, then you're going to suffer because it's already changed. Just in the course of this Dhamma talk, your six senses have already changed. But if there's no attachment or identity to any aspect of the six senses, then, and there's the willingness to let all of it cease, let all of it disappear without the slightest trace of grief, then the mind cannot be disturbed or bothered by anything. So then the mind is always in a state of unconditional happiness. Those are my thoughts on this discourse. At this time, we can respect the sutta with 3 sadhus, and I'll see if there's any questions on this. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And hello to the people joining in online. So hello to John, Nick, Yankee, Sud, Mir, Rebecca, Maria, Hum, Bhumika, Saw, Randall, and everyone else who's joining in. Good to see you joining in. And Sud asks, is giving up attachment to the 6 senses a form of generosity? Yes, and that you're giving yourself happiness. So that's actually a huge gift to give yourself. So the thing is that attachment to the 6 senses, identification with the 6 senses, that's just causing ourselves pain. It's just causing suffering, that's all. So letting go of that attachment, that misidentification, it's giving happiness. It's giving contentment. It's giving joy. So yeah, there's a way you could say that's a form of generosity. And Sud says, is it still not in line of right view to view 6 senses and their objects with a broad brush of metta? So the 6 senses themselves are just impersonal natural processes. So there's no person there to have metta for. So if instead you mean having metta for yourself, then yeah, of course, having metta for yourself is in line with right view. But having metta for your 6 senses is, well, like the simile the Buddha gave, it's like having metta for a pile of sticks in a forest. It's like, well, of course, metta is always relevant, but the way metta is defined is as benevolence for sentient beings. So wishing for beings to be happy. And it would be kind of weird to want for a pile of sticks to be happy. So the six senses themselves are not a person. The six senses are a natural process which we misidentify as being me or mine, but that's not a person. So it'd be quite strange to say like, oh, I have metta for visual consciousness. I have metta for tongue contact. Yeah, it just doesn't work in my mind anyway. It doesn't make sense. But saying I have metta for myself, this poor, ignorant, delusional, unenlightened person stumbling their way through samsara, it's like, well, of course I can have metta for a person like that. Randall says, what is the Buddhist perspective on experiencing without the body? The only way I know is near-death experience or astral travel or disidentify using psychedelics like ayahuasca. Well, there's a couple of places where experience of mind without body is mentioned in the suttas. So one is in the speak about the non-physical concentration states. So the arupa samapati. So arupa means non-physical. Literally, arupa means non-body, no body. So these are 4 states of meditative concentration, which are quite advanced. They're very difficult. They're well out of reach for most people, except sometimes during very intensive retreat. Sometimes it's possible to get into these states. And these are 4 increasingly subtle and refined states of mind in which the experience of the body has disappeared entirely. And there is the experience of only the mind. The body, the whole physical realm has disappeared entirely for a period of time. And of course, it's not that physical reality no longer exists. It's just that that person is in a state of meditation in which their physical experience has shut off temporarily. And they're just experiencing their mind and nothing physical at all. So that's one thing which is possible, again, in certain states of deep meditation. They're not required for attaining awakening. So some people develop those meditation experiences during their path, and some people don't, because it's not necessary to attain full awakening. And actually, I think the Buddha described those states of meditation primarily so that people would not misidentify them as awakening. Because that was one of the problems that was going on during the Buddha's time, is that some people were having these concentration experiences where their body disappears, and they were thinking that that was enlightenment, that was awakening. So the Buddha was quite clear that that's not awakening. That's just a temporary experience that can sometimes happen during meditation. The other place where mind-only experience is mentioned is as being one of the possible forms of rebirth. So there is a section of heaven realm, states of existence, in which beings have no bodies, no physical body at all. So they exist only as a mind. And those are described as extremely peaceful and pleasant forms of existence. But of course, they're also not the end goal of Buddhist practice, because they're just another temporary experience within samsara. So one can be a mind-only being, a mind-only deva, for a very long period of time, but still not attain awakening, and still eventually be reborn as a human, or even lower. And of course, the other place where disappearance of the body comes up, and this is where how it comes up for most people, is just when you lose mindfulness. So usually when somebody comes to me and says, oh, Bhante, my body disappeared during meditation, and I'm like, oh, really? I start asking questions, and what they actually mean is their mindfulness disappeared during meditation. And they spaced out for a few minutes, or they dozed off for a few minutes and they thought that their body had disappeared. But actually, it's just that one loses one's body mindfulness. So that's not a profound or deep meditation experience. That's actually a meditation disaster. So 99% of the time, when somebody has a experience of their body disappearing, 99% of the time is just because they've lost mindfulness for a period of time. So usually nothing more than that. As for near-death experiences or astral travel, I don't have anything to say about those things, and the Buddha himself didn't have much to say about it either. So I'll set that aside. And Rebecca says, it seems like one has to have an experience of spiritual contentment to start to let go of identification with the senses. Yeah, it helps tremendously. So a major element of Buddhist practice is cultivating, contentment and equanimity. So training the mind to be perfectly happy with things exactly as they are, however they are. So whatever is going on right now, it's totally fine, no problem. Everything's okay. So cultivating that attitude of mind makes it much easier to let go. Because usually the reason why we're so deeply attached to our sensory experiences is because we think that happiness comes through sensation. Happiness comes through sensory experience. This is why it's so hard for us to let go of sensory experience. It's because we think of it as our source of happiness. But contentment does not depend upon sensation. So as we cultivate an attitude of contentment, then we realize that we're not dependent upon sensation in order to be happy. The mind can be perfectly happy without any sensation at all, or it can be perfectly happy with any kind of sensation. Even painful sensation does not need to disturb our happiness. So yes, absolutely, cultivating contentment and equanimity is, if not necessary, then at least extraordinarily helpful for training the mind to let go of identification with the senses. Yes. And Garrison says, it looks like one has to strip away everything. What about the good things one has? Well, of course, the Buddha talks about practice in different ways. One way that the Buddha talks about practice is to cultivate the wholesome and abandon the unwholesome. So cultivating the wholesome means deliberately building up beneficial traits in the mind. Beneficial traits like loving kindness, compassion, mindfulness, equanimity, concentration, wisdom. So deliberately cultivating wholesome things. And those are things which you actually do want to make some effort to hold on to. So the Buddha gives the simile of the raft. So in the simile of the raft, you're on the near shore of the river where it's dangerous. You want to get to the far shore where it's safe. So you build a raft. And holding tightly to that raft, you paddle your way across the river to safety. And then when you get to the far shore, then you leave the raft behind and you go on your way. So building the raft, the Buddha says, is the Noble Eightfold Path. So the raft is something which you hold on to tightly. It's something which you build up and hold on to tightly so that you can get to safety. So this then is actually a healthy form of attachment, a healthy form of clinging. So it's attachment to the Noble Eightfold Path, clinging to the Noble Eightfold Path. This is what gets us to let go of all the harmful things in our mind and brings us to the brink of full awakening. And Sud says, does letting go of the six senses happen automatically if one lets go of self-view? So identification with the six senses is an aspect of self-identity. So yes, if you completely let go of self-identity, then by definition, you're also letting go of identification with the six senses. But usually it's done the other way around. Usually we start with working on our more coarse manifestations of self-identity, such as identification with sensation, with the six senses. And then that leads us to starting to identify the underlying core self-identity, self-view, self-belief, so that then we can start working on eroding that. So usually we start with what's more obvious, more blatant, and then gradually work towards what is more subtle and more refined. That's the last question online. Are there any questions from the residents here at the monastery? Yes, go ahead.
What about the gender identification?
Gender identification?
Yeah. Is that something that we have to let go? Or?
Yeah, absolutely. So whether you think I'm a man or I am a woman or I am something else or I am anything at all, that all needs to be let go of. So whether it matches your physiology or not, doesn't matter. It's something to let go of. So the truth is we're not anything at all. I am not a man. I am not a woman. I'm not anything at all. So there might be a particular body experience currently happening, but that's not who we are. It's just another temporary experience. So yeah, absolutely. Gender identity is part of the whole mass of identities that needs to be let go of. Yeah, go ahead.
One thing that I'm curious about is if there's a skillful kind of temporary conception one can make, for instance, imagining that the body is something under someone else's care that you're just kind of taken care of in their absence, and that can be like a way to still be attentive to like the needs of it and whatnot, but kind of weaning yourself off, so to speak.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Kind of like a foster cat. Like I have a foster cat in my room. So I care about him and I take care of him and I'm trying to make sure that everything's okay for him. But there's a very clear sense he's not mine. And he's definitely not me. It's not me, not mine. But still, there's a sense of responsibility to take care of him and make sure that he's okay. So yeah, actually, I think that's a good attitude to cultivate towards your own body and mind. Like, this is not me, this is not mine. However, I have an opportunity to take care of this being, to look after it. Yeah, I like that. That's a good attitude. Yeah. The six senses are a foster cat. Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
It's who we are.
What's that?
It's who we are.
Nothing.
And what is the point of being?
There is no point.
There's no point at all?
Nope.
Good.
It's more like one giant cosmic accident.
So which means maybe we don't have to learn anything too.
That's correct.
And not even practice anything.
That's incorrect.
How so?
Because we're suffering. So right now we have a habit of inflicting suffering on ourselves. And we just keep doing it over and over again. So it's an activity that we're doing. And it's kind of like you're constantly punching yourself in the face. And it's kind of like, well, this hurts, but I don't know anything else. And the Buddha's like, well, maybe you should just stop punching yourself.
But maybe once the six senses gone, you don't even feel anything. And the suffering doesn't mean anything either. And we not even know if we actually suffering.
Then train yourself to let go of the six senses. Because that's the thing, is that we have this strong habit of constantly generating and identifying as and attaching to the six senses. So this is actually the self-torture process that we're doing. We're constantly tormenting ourselves with this experience, but it's totally unnecessary. So this is practice. Practice is training ourselves to stop torturing ourselves.
How do we know that the practice is not torturing us as well?
So look at your mind. Is your mind becoming increasingly happy? Is it becoming increasingly calm? If so, then you're practicing correctly. If the opposite is happening, then you're practicing incorrectly.
What if the mind doesn't do anything either? It's not happy, not sad. So whatever.
Well, if you're cultivating clarity and serenity, then that is a particular form of happiness. Yeah, peacefulness. So a peaceful, yet clear. So very alert, very aware, yet very peaceful.
What if we alert? I don't know what peaceful yet, but it's maybe just at the moment. It's clear, but it doesn't matter whether or not it's peaceful or not.
Cultivate joy with the peacefulness.
Then
because
how
there's
you can
so
attach to the joy.
So not mattering, there's a distinction that needs to be made between apathy and equanimity. So apathy is like it doesn't matter, I don't care. Whereas equanimity is like I'm paying full attention, but also completely accepting whatever's present.
Yes,
So not reacting to whatever comes, either with desire or aversion. So equanimity is actually a subtle form of happiness, whereas apathy is actually a subtle form of irritation. So equanimity is like everything is totally okay, no problem, everything's fine. Whereas apathy is more like, I don't care, I'm not interested. So there's a subtle difference between the two. Equanimity is a subtle form of happiness. Apathy is a subtle form of irritation.
What about it's not either two of them? That's what I meant. I'm not irritating, but
delusion types.
You know. Okay.
Relax. Let everything go. Relax. Just enjoy doing nothing at all. Pay attention to how wonderful it is to do nothing at all. Just do that. That alone is sufficient.
Okay.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Why are we more inclined to cause ourselves suffering rather than detach from the senses?
Bad habits.
More inclined to joy?
Bad habits.
Is it just habits?
Yeah. Habits and delusion. It's also because we misidentify happiness. So elsewhere in the suttas, the Buddha says that I'm trying to remember how exactly he phrases it. But basically he says that we have an inverted perception. We think that suffering is happiness. So we, for example, we think that pursuing pleasant sensation is going to make us happy. But what we're missing is the fact that pursuing is itself painful. And even when we get what we want, it's usually not particularly satisfying. So we think that we're doing things to make ourselves happy, but actually that activity is making us unhappy. So there's this inverted perception. So, I mean, ultimately everyone wants to be happy. It's just that they don't recognize that in pursuing happiness, they're inflicting suffering on themselves. That the pursuit of happiness is itself a form of self-torture. So yeah, this is what it comes down to. So bad habits and delusion. So not recognizing that the ways we're trying to pursue happiness are actually causing the opposite effect. And also through a limited perspective. So focusing on the pleasant aspect of whatever we're doing, but ignoring the torment that we put ourselves through in order to get that limited bit of pleasure. So this also generates this distorted relationship with reality, with our experience. Yeah, so the Buddhist teachings, at first, they can be a bit counterintuitive, because it seems like, oh, why would I let go of my senses? My senses are where all my happiness comes from. But actually, it's this constant addiction to sensation that has the mind in this turmoil. This constant state of disturbance and agony is caused by addiction to sensation, this constant pursuit of specific sensations. So letting go of the six senses doesn't necessarily mean that all your senses immediately disappear. In fact, it usually doesn't work that way. But rather, it means that whatever sensations appear, your mind is happy regardless. So the Buddha is talking about unconditional happiness. He's talking about training ourselves to be happy all the time, regardless of what kind of sensation is present. And that breaks this harmful habit in mind. Does that clear that up at all? Does that help? Okay, and it looks like that's it for this session. So we'll go ahead and conclude the sutta discussion with 3 sadhus. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And we'll see you this evening for monk chat.